When set and action.
The Super Bowl essentially is between one Smith and Neil, with all the other Smiths standing on and watching, like a kind of football crowd.
In this day and age to do a hybrid film of live action and visual effects, you gotta be able to do some shots in camera.
Because of the nature of some of the shots that had to be done in the scene, where really you would be concentrating on Keanu and Hugo fighting and it's raining. In the background you had to have Smith, many Smiths. But you wouldn't want to have to put them in every shot as a visual effect. So I said one day, well, why don't we make a whole of, rubber Smiths? And they looked at me like I was completely mad.
We went through a variety of ideas and eventually arrived at some pretty photorealistic dummies.
Hugh and Peter want to put so much effort into getting the right molds and doing the right work on the faces. They were really like Hugo.
They were pretty successful and turned out so much better than it seemed like we were going to be able to do at the beginning.
We've got to do a cast of this one, and we've got to do this one again. Now, this one a little bit more meaner.
There are three different models. There's grumpy, there's happy, and there's neutral. And they made more neutrals than they made grumpies and happies.
Just neutral versus
taking 3 head impressions of Hugo Weaving. What we'll be doing is a combination of Agent Smith masks as well as dummies, 100 dummies and 50 masks to be worn by actors.
They did a number of different tryouts, a number of different materials to make the mask and to try and get the right tone.
That was the original one we made. That's a hard resin. So is this one. The reaction was it looked too hard. So we've since then made some out of silicon rubber. The purpose of doing a silicon skin is that when the lights are on this, the silicon skin will glow like human flesh. And the rain also sits differently in it. It just runs off, whereas on the fiberglass head, the rain just tends to sit there.
They'd also got my body as well on hands and put hands in gel. They've wrapped my body up in plaster bandages and I stood there for like hours and so this is me.
So after it's been painted, we'll send that off to the hair and makeup. We'll put a wig on it.
It's been an interesting project because this scene that we're doing, I don't think has ever been done before. I don't think anything like it has been done before. We're cutting 182 wigs. We've had all the wigs handmade. They're all hand-tied. They're going to be standing in the pouring rain, which makes throws another element into what we have to think about or how we're thinking about doing these wigs. They have to endure heavy rain and they can't get messed up. That's the trick. We actually put silicone on the hair so we kept up that little front, which gives him that Smith look.
They had to make a wig for me because all my doubles were standing there beautifully with their hair staying up in the rain, but my hair in the rain, even with the massive amount of hairspray, started to just fall down on my face. That's how crazy it got.
Our department have worked out an elaborate system of keeping everyone warm, keeping everyone dry.
Yeah, it's a major collaboration between the art department, props department, and costume, getting everybody looking the same.
60 masks, 60 corresponding wigs.
You have to multiply everything by 100. There's 100 left hands, right hands, feet, shoes, ties, tie pins, cufflinks.
It's a big challenge because of the intensity of the rain all the time. It's hard to be in the rain every day for 15 hours.
I seem to recall having 80 humans and 150 fiberglass dummies, which the art department made up, and they were fantastic because they were all dimensionally perfect. It was easy to deal with them. It was the 80 humans. They're all 6'2", but they're so different, and some had long torsos, some were all legs, some had extremely sloping shoulders. Larry and Andy wanted to do a tracking shot, and everybody's shoulder points had to meet.
And at the moment we have a whole team of dummies. This, we'll have a row of 51, and another row of 51, and then a row of 50 or 51 extras, who will also be wearing Hugo Weaving or Agent Smith look-like masks. And then we'll be training them on how to use the mechanism and left-right turns and nods and what have you.
They all have handles in the back, which are operated by one extra. Operates 2 Hugos, turning the heads or tilting the heads and turning.
This is the repair station. With the turning of the heads, there's a lot of wear and tear on the necks, and the paint tends to rub and lift a bit, so we have to repaint and seal the necks. The silicone paint that we use takes a day to fully dry before we put them back into the neck mechanisms.
It's awesome. We had this skin-tight wetsuit. You can't even move it, cuts the circulation off your arms because of the water. It's piling down, the biggest storm you've ever seen in your life, and we're in this mask that we can't get out of all day. But it's all in good fun.
They're quite disconcerting, right? Even to Hugo.
The communists? No!
Yeah, even Mr. Weaving himself got a bit spooked when he saw himself replicated many times.
Same. Everyone is the same.
Hugo's been very good. He's been very happy to have his head moulded, and I think he loves looking at all these guys.
You love me?
Seeing Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne or Hugo Weaving doing the stunt, it just opens up a whole new world. When you see the guys falling down, those are the real actors falling down.
So maybe if it's just like a regular, so if that last left, so, yeah. You know, so if I just hold that one there, and if you went to throw the other one,
you know, it was really up to us some days to ask everyone around us, Wu Ping's team and the American and Australian stunt teams, what we needed to do. You know, I had a real input into sometimes.
Just classic. And then that's like not working out for a while.
The first time the fights were choreographed, and we learnt them like dances, like ballets, and they didn't change. They hardly changed at all when we shot them. This time round, there were quite major changes made on the day while we were fighting, and we had to swing with that and accept that, well, now you weren't doing that, you were actually doing that, or there was a kick coming in or something, or you just cut out an element because that part of the fight was too long.
Everyone, I think, because they had their own experience before, knew how they personally wanted to involve themselves in their training.
It was pretty daunting, but I was actually just determined to train hard and train well and to get fit and not get injured.
You've got a 20-pound sandbag on your back and someone's pushing you, looking to warm you up after 2 hours so that they can crack, basically trying to open up your ligaments here so you're gonna split and then, you know, go, you ready? And then when you least expect, you know. And after they do that, you go, thank you. Thank you for making me cry, because now I can kick higher.
I always say, Tiger, you kill me. Never somebody treat me like this, push me so hard, make me cry every day. If you want to kick that high, you want to look good on movie, I say you have to.
It's good fun, but it's taxing. And I'm an old man. I'm 37 years old, you know.
Very few times you get pushed to your actual ability. I think Larry and Andy have done a pretty exceptional job of pushing the martial arts stunt team pretty much to their ability. They don't stop till they get exactly what they want.
Their whole thing is to push you that a little bit farther, and as frustrating as it gets, it really brings the best out in everybody.
For me, it's such a great opportunity to be able to be asked to do that. If it's easier for me to start in one spot and do a move, they'll go, oh, we'd like you to start in the action just behind, where you have to do a 360 turn around and do it.
Oh God, we did one little piece, we had like 78 takes, I think. And then went back the next day and did another 15 on just one very percussive piece of fight. And then when we got into the crater, we were fighting in the mud as well. So it was mud and rain, but by that stage, the fight had become more like flailing around, you know.
No matter how good you think it is, you got to go that extra notch. And we're talking perfection, which is good. It pushes all of us, but the Wachowski factor is definitely something to contend with.
3, 2, 1, go!
Chad Stahelski has been such a great boon, I think, to this project. He developed a thing called the twisty belt. Allowed me to do backflips into cartwheels. We could do multi-directional rotations as opposed to being limited by a regular Hong Kong harness. You know, in this, you could twist and rotate.
It's like it's a metal corset. Yeah, it feels quite comfortable, but I don't think you'd want to wear it for very long.
Wire work, when you first see it, it seems easy, but it takes a lot of practice to get used to. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world, and it takes time. Because whether or not the wire lifts you up or puts you down, you still need to be flexible. You still need to be able to kick, you still need to be able to punch, and you still need the strength to pull your body up in the positions that we need. Shot for shot, that's Keanu doing it. That's him getting his leg way up here, kicking the guys in the head. That's him flying up in the air, coming down with the triple kicks and stuff. That's them.
Trying to find the sky like no one's ever fought in the sky before.
Action! Hard, lead, kick!
We've seen some flight occur, but they wanted to see it in a way that we would assume would be the characters would have weight and they would move and they would feel like they were flying.
The tuning forks were very interesting because of what Chad wanted to achieve you could not do on wires.
So we looked at all these Cirque du Soleil and special acrobatic type tapes, and there's equipment that they were using. Conceptually, we saw a connection, or at least the martial arts guys and Chad and RA, you know, sort of borrowed from some, you know, basically circus methods.
We took a gymnastic, a trampoline twisting belt, or aerial spotting belt, and modified it to take the weight and stress load that the belts experience in these rigs, and then made it about twice as smooth and about 10 times as strong. And then used special adapters to plug into our single arm pitchforks. Chop! Bam! Good. Faster you get around, the better.
14 guys just to operate the tuning forks, and so you had to coordinate and choreograph, and everyone had to be in tune and in sync with each other because of the actors and the stunt guys actually coming in, fighting, spinning, rotating, and the mass of those two units was quite extreme. They had to be very diligent and very careful because the impact of those two mechanisms was a very dangerous thing.
The tuning forks are not comfortable at best. They're ugly. They hurt, especially the twisty belts, and they just tear on your hips. Really, it's a lot of pain.
We're just always in the harnesses, and after like 18 hours, it kind of hurts most of the time.
The guys get in them, and they would go into what we call the cave. They would just get so far into pain, and the pain would go away, and they would just, you didn't really want to talk to them. They would just look at you, and they would acknowledge you, and they knew what you asked them to do, but there wasn't any friendly socializing going on there. And try to put the actors in for the as minimal amount of time as possible because it was not comfortable. We made a pack. When you got in them, you shot till you were done.
So whenever you're flipping or twisting around the hit, look for him.
Okay.
And that keeps your eyes focused on something. That may hold off the nausea.
The nausea.
But what is the difference between this and the yak rig?
Well, on the yak rig, you yak.
Again, another one of those torture deals, but this was a pole that the two gentlemen face each other and they could turn this way. The pole would allow them to turn this way, and then they could turn the whole base this way. So you had 3 axes going. Real unfriendly rig, hurt again in the hips, made you sick to your stomach.
So it's like a really good carnival ride. And because there's two of us in it, it's a nice challenge to see who's going to quit first.
It became a game with them who was going to wimp out first on them, but they didn't like it. You know, it was not good. They were good for about 10 or 15 rotations at a time. Then it was a lot of eyes rolling back in their heads and, you know, trying to see who was going to keep their lunch down.
It's called the yak rake for one reason.
When it goes good, it feels good. When it doesn't go good, it doesn't feel good.
The diggers basically are nothing more than, you know, as the name implies, the devices that just bore holes from the surface of the Earth through every tunnel between the surface and Zion, eventually poking holes in the dock.
And they just described they wanted this scary thing. And they described digging machines, and I called up mining companies to get information on mining equipment.
I did do some sculpting on the digger, and our inspiration was supposed to look half mechanical and a little crustacean. I do think it's a really cool look.
I tried to make them look like teeth. I had some of them worn off, and they look like bicuspids and molars and shit like that. When I lived out in the country, I'd see this farm equipment that used to plow the ground up, and you'd see that stuff, the metal wears down and breaks off so easy, so I'd try to age the metal and make it look like, you know, it was breaking off as it was going through the earth.
On this set here, there's like lots of, you know, dead sentinels around, but probably if you're on this set and while we were filming, there is like, you know, hundreds upon hundreds of sentinels flying around.
Brothers and John Gata were both wanting very much to see something new. They wanted to add a little bit more to the Sentinels as far as character elements. Consequently, we have to find places where we can bring out those character elements, but not change them to the degree where they don't feel they work with the Sentinels from the first film.
It's always nice when you can make a Sentinel look like he's thinking. That's the real trick. You know, any kind of animation is making an inanimate object look like it's having a thought and an emotion.
Yeah. See, again, you feel that, you know, there was something going on in that head. When I get comments like, the Sentinels really have, you know, attitude and personality here, and there's a purpose here, then, you know, I know that, well, we achieved something.
There's a lot of flying Sentinel shots.
Oh, well, just the hand of God is a mass of Sentinels that...
Imagine a school of sardines.
Yeah, exactly, like a school
Killer
of fish
sardines.
or something that just kind of form this massive tentacle hand thing that just attacks everything.
The Sentinels, I think, are great. I love the way they're designed. I mean, the Sentinels can do anything, pretty much.
I know what I have to do. What? I have to take one of the ships. What? To go where? To the Machine City.
Machine City is the last environment that we haven't seen, and even though we saw a taste of it in the first movie, it didn't all come together until Revolutions.
You could see their vision, even in the script, it was something completely different. They definitely wanted it to be scary and atmospheric and epic.
To me, it's a lot more abstract. A world that's been built by machines, and they don't think like we do. So what we might find aesthetically beautiful, they wouldn't. For them, there is no up, there is no down, there's no inside, no outside, because they don't, you know, gravity doesn't mean anything to them. They don't have a sense of, you know, equilibrium like we do, so it doesn't matter that they're, you know, they could be coming out of the ceiling, or they could be, you know, living upside down. It doesn't exist for them.
Larry and Andy had Jeff do a concept. What he came up with, I think from their brief initially, was the inside of a spinal cord. I think the drawing he did, which was very kind of mechanical looking tubes, which were interconnected with what we call centicles now. You kind of got this feeling that all a series of conduits that run down, but it's like being inside the core of a spinal cord. We need to define a physical way of building it, so I thought in the end it was best to sort of finish the cylinders with these claw pieces, and then when you cut back to the wide shot, which will be really made up as a visual effects shot, you will end up with these very large crustacean type pieces. You get a sense of of drama of this kind of scale.
The Machine City actually, it's always been kind of referred to as like a coral reef or some kind of a foreign kind of a landscape that's just teeming with life.
It did sort of look like it was grown, and there was a sort of a hive, sort of a thing to it.
There were no miniatures. That was one of the interesting things about the job for us, is that normally, you know, with visual effects, you get like background plates, photographic plates you incorporate elements into. And I think that we had something less than a third of the shots that we did had either a foreground plate of the actors in a cockpit or a background plate in some cases with Neo walking down the tunnel into the Machine City. So, man, the amount of digital stuff we had to create was just outrageous.
What the boys always felt is that, you know, the most perfect forms in our world are insects. They're designed to move and be protected, and they're aerodynamically correct, that they can defend themselves. So most of the machine creatures are essentially insect-based.
But some of the things that were interesting is when we started using like particle systems to grow the city. You know, we would run these simulations, and the guys did a great job. Dan Rolonek did all these particle simulations that would sort of create city pieces that would grow buildings. Like we broke the buildings down into different types of buildings and different pieces of buildings. So you might have a base of a building and a tip of a building, and you could recombine those in different orders, and you could give different kind of growth patterns. Now,
the Logos crashes, he sort of crawls out of the Logos, and there's like a big kind of like funnel set, if you like, which sort of takes him to the Deus Ex Machina.
There's several, you know, different areas that we knew were going to be kind of exciting challenges, and the Deus was one of them.
What are you going to draw? What is it going to be? And I didn't want to think about it at all, because I thought this is going to be the hardest thing to draw in this movie, because it's the, it's the God machine. It had to be something that a human would recognize as, would have to be humanistic, so that, you know, Neo could relate to it, and the audience as well. And, you know, everybody thinks of God with the flowing white beard and all this, and I think that's what everybody thought it was going to do, something like that. And I thought I'd go in the opposite direction, and it's the face of a baby, which I thought was pretty horrific, because it's got this horrible urchin-y thing, and all of a sudden all these little robots come out, and they form like the most innocent thing that's possible.
So we started out with the mechanics of it. The guy's like a big porcupine, or again, kind of an aquatic reference, like a big sea urchin, a spiny sea urchin. So we built the initial model with all these spikes everywhere and portals and such. At the same time, we had to work out kind of a performance basis for the guy, right? He was going to form a face. So first off, we went and shot a photographic reference of the director's nephew, Henry. We tried to get key expressions that the Deus would be going through. The parents were there, and they put the toy in front of him and then pull it away to try and get him to do some frowns. We finally got him to cry, which was some of the most appropriate reference that we got. And then the next step was to work with Kevin, one of the actors who was in Light of the Osiris, and we did motion capture sessions and having him go through the lines and generic poses, looking for, again, performance cues. And for the swarms, we took a lot of reference from schools of fish, basically sardines and whatnot, and also tried to mix in some kind of a weird stuff like frequency-dependent, you know, movement that you might see like in iron filings, magnetic fields, or also a field that's kind of loosely called cymatics, which is this idea of sort of visualizing different frequencies through like a lycopodium powder. And there's some pretty outrageous movement and stuff that you see in there. So we started to try to line up what our design elements are that we could use.
It is done.
And then I did the, I guess it's a garbage scow, you know, that at the end that transports Neo. It's a dinosaur. I managed to get a dinosaur into the movie. It's like a sort of a triceratops kind of a thing. I just, you know, I got a piece of paper and a pencil, and I can come up with all this stuff, but they got to make it work, and they do.
The only way we got through it was by the talent and perseverance of the whole crew that was working on the show.
It's like it's very easy to get sort of jaded just looking at a little gray box all day long. Seeing rendered stuff really kind of kicks you back into reality, and then you're working on something that's going to be really cool when all the elements are stuck together.
Everybody put their back into it and just really kind of pulled miracles out of their pockets on a regular basis.
It's pretty mind-blowing just to see the amount of work that we were able to pull off of this thing.
The term bullet time is a dramatic convention that Andy and Larry made up. Bullet time is basically a mind over matrix moment where we
detach the time and space of the subject from the camera.
You always know that you're doing something that is groundbreaking. If someone asks something that you go, maybe.
You know, a lot of people in the visual effects industry, early on when they knew what we were doing for Matrix, thought we were crazy. Yeah, you're smart, but you're not that smart.
It's like a small idea that gets bigger and bigger and bigger and then finally becomes supernatural. It is just staggering.
Where we were in the mid-90s was attempting to create the illusion that a camera could move at subsonic speeds, a virtual-looking camera that had to be done in a very physically laborious way. We shot that test in a junkyard with a handful of still cameras that we bought locally. 120 cameras and 2 motion picture cameras set up.
It was photographic, it was two-dimensional, and really there was only one path that our camera could run because we had to plan it and lay out all these still cameras.
From that point, we have found ourselves making what we call today virtual cinema and virtual cinematography, which is where the camera is detached in its time and space from the subjects. Still bullet time, and we move in and out of amazing moments, but the methods that we're using are completely different.
Virtual cinematography is a phrase that John coined. It's using real live photography of elements, whether it be stills photographs or a piece of motion picture footage or high-def photography, and manipulating it inside a computer to be able to repurpose it and reformat it so you can see it from different angles, different camera speeds. It's kind of a digitization of the real world that then allows you to have a virtual camera that can fly anywhere in that scene.
The possibilities for slowing down the motion, speeding up the motion, and basically like throwing the camera wherever you want. It allows you to move the camera in ways that a real camera would by no means be able to move.
So it escalates way beyond first experiments in bullet time, because we really could get any angle on this action now. Infinite camera perspectives are available. A little shorter on the wince part, because it's really the greatest part of it, and a little longer on the virtual human process is a combination of the motion capture and universal capture.
You're in the air, and here comes the flame, and in the back, you feel?
The real thing that we were very, very scared with at the beginning was how could you produce a rendition of your principal actors at a realistic enough level that you don't create a loss of belief from the audience. What we decided to do was build something that was based on analyzing a real performance.
Nothing will surpass the qualities that a random performance could give you from a real actor, real person.
We pretty much settled on the faces would be the hardest thing to recreate.
We decided to build this system, which we call Universal Capture System, which consists of 6 high-definition cameras and arranged around that actor's face.
If you filmed a real actor with film cameras or digital cameras, as it turned out to be, from enough angles, and were able to write some very clever sort of machine vision processing algorithms, you'll actually be able to produce a very realistic digitization of one of our actors. And from that source material, we derive all moving dimensional models with all the texture associated with the face. This is the sort of new and fun part of the process. A
procedure known as motion capture.
The more of the real actor we can use, the better.
The stick figure really represents the bones inside of the character. And so the nice thing is that you can put that inside any character.
The scene that it's most applied to is the Burley Brawl. And the procedure for that was to figure out the master plan for the choreography, captured all these little components, and then composed.
For the Burley Brawl, because there were 350 Agent Smiths in one shot, there's no way you would be able to do it any other way. We pretty much had to do it as digital humans.
So looking at virtual Keanu, it is Keanu performing underneath that CG shell, and all of his training pays off for our material just as it does on film.
With many years of development and many people working very hard to try and get the essence of Hugo and Keanu into these digital characters.
At this point, nothing is real. This is all just computer graphic.
The backgrounds and the original bullet time stuff were done through a technique called image-based rendering, where we took still photographs of the sets that Owen Patterson built or some of the live-action environments, and we're able to reconstruct dimensionally what them sets were, so that we could then, inside the computer, produce a virtual fly-through.
What this means is we take photographs and we project them onto geometry, which allow us to create 3D environments.
It's possible for somebody to build a set, like Owen Patterson, to design and build a set, and we can go and photograph it and recreate it exactly inside the computer. So we can pretty much match Bill's lighting and Bill's photographic look. That really is the essence of virtual cinematography.
For Trinity Falls and Reloaded, specific buildings in Sydney have been selected to be the environment, and so those have been all photographed.
All the way down. It doesn't involve us completely making synthetic creations in the computer. We still need a real set, real lighting, and real photography to get it to work, because it actually gives a very realistic look to the movie.
It's amazing what you got to do just to get the rudimentary components as a starting place, the canvas, to put the other elements on. So today we're going to get our endless megacity sprawl.
Megacity is based on tons and tons and tons and tons of photographs of Sydney, Australia. Sydney, Australia isn't necessarily the look of the Matrix, so we had to repurpose a lot of it and extend buildings, change color palettes, make them look a little bit more interesting. And that was done by our map painting department and our virtual background department.
We created buildings based on the photos, but extended them to 100 stories, sometimes 200 stories tall buildings.
We see Megacity at its grandest in the Superfight. It's an excellent combination of virtual backgrounds, matte painting, and synthetic characters.
The number one obstacle for doing flying successfully was weightlessness and the feeling that you were not encumbered by gravity and the physical constraints that doing rigs on sets brings you. So we had a blue screen shoot that involved special rigs, and then at the same time we begun animation of the other superhero human flying shots.
A lot of things that we're doing is taking a lot of wire stunts and making them look like they're not on wires. Kind of like digital wire removal in CG world. And also stuff that's like impossible to capture, we would just go in and hand animate it.
With hand animation, it was getting a much more fluid look. Really gets a performance that you can nail down to the millimeter. In the Superfight, 70% of the rain that you see is synthetic computer-generated rain.
Integrating computer graphic rain with real rain and different layers deep of both.
It took us a long time to get the rain system to match the live action, to the point that we could actually insert in the middle synthetic rain. characters was quite a challenge. Our cloth department not only excelled at producing a really kick-ass looking dynamic for wet clothing for Neo and for Smith, but also were able to produce really excellent looking water spray that every time they fight or hit each other, spray goes flying off.
A lot of technology being arrayed to basically understand the water, how it really works in the real world, and then how to stylize it. How about really hard?
Action!
The punch is the definitive blow delivered by Neo. We're looking to really amp up the drama of a fist, and it will be smashing through rain that's nearly suspended, and the rain will smash off in a zero GE way. So we're basically going to cover it virtually with computer graphic fist scene with somewhat of vertigo camera lensing to create a real sense of enormous mass.
This sequence is one of the biggest visual effects sequences in the movie. Blue screens, CG rain, actual CG digital Neo and Smith characters. This has everything thrown in.
It's just a logical extension of the whole notion of CGI.
Larry and Eddie will take risks. They kind of pushed us into reaching them extra limits. It's not a question that you may want to do it or you can't do it, you have to do it.
Filmmaking in general has now this new tool,
which I believe allows directors and writers and cinematographers to transcend all of the physical boundaries that are placed upon us by shooting here in the everyday world. It liberates the filmmaker in ways that they never have been before. And that is a pretty long stretch in that time frame.
Right now, I'm making concrete pipes for blowing up. Pretty much that's what we make most of our stuff for, is blowing stuff up.
Every time you see a spaceship crash into the ground, be it in, Planet of the Apes or Independence Day, it's really, it's a miniature.
The scale of this is massive. And to get that scale and debris and fire and everything, nothing can compete with a miniature.
Things that would be destroyed or be huge event locations where things would just shatter.
CG is not really too great on doing stuff like explosions, interaction of stuff actually hitting, matching, and debris coming off. So that's the stuff that really sort of happens here.
There's just a lot of serendipity or randomness that happens.
We can pick up a lot of that detail that we wouldn't otherwise be able to get. And so, trying to get that extra little bit of realism into our CG city.
Sim says the person's probably just about this tall.
When they say you're going to work on the model unit, you imagine these tiny little models, little figures, and then you realize when you arrive that, either something that's in 10th scale or 3rd scale or 5th scale is still huge.
Technically, it is a miniature, even though that ship is close to a ton.
They're the biggest miniatures you've ever seen. They don't look like miniatures at all. They look like live action sets.
The studio started calling them bigatures because, like the dock doors, even though it's 10th scale, is really 30 feet high and 40 feet wide.
Why aren't we building this even, half this scale? It's because we have explosions and fire, and you can't change the size of fire.
action!
On this film, we pretty much started out with the digger, which is our key actors, our players in this. We built part of a 5th scale digger and a 10th scale digger.
They built a shape of the finished digger, essentially, but with absolutely no features on it whatsoever, but very heavy. It weighed a couple of 100 pounds, I think, and so they could drop it in a controlled manner into the specially constructed 1 to 10 scale pipes.
This is going to be where the digger plunges into the lower dock set. These pipes are pyrosil and aluminum, and they're going to crush down to simulate real pipes. Should be good.
Right, but you want the pyro coming from inside the pipes, though.
Yeah, inside the
So
catwalk.
it was difficult to build these complex environments and make all of the reactions happen properly. That the explosions, the pipes that would flip up into frame, the debris that would fall, tried to capture as much of that as possible.
Action!
This project I have right now, we're taking miniature sentinels, I call them baby sentinels, and we're destroying them. They're the dead sentinels that'll be placed on one of the crash sets.
And those sentinels have been used for a dropping sequence. It looks like a great big pile of seaweed. It's a fantastic effect.
They are evil little creatures, but the bad guys are always so much neater, so I like working with the bad guys.
A lot of the miniatures, again, have to do with interaction. In the case of the dock, you had a control tower up there that topples down during the battle, and that will be built in miniature just for that purpose.
The hamburger is an extension of what we built in Australia.
They built like the top 20 feet of this in live action, and we've built everything above that. And this tower will be in a giant room that'll be generated in computer graphics.
Primarily, it's for where they need to go really close so that you don't have to go and render the whole thing out for that.
There's a lot of fine detail surface area on this one.
They'll build all the core structures out of wood and steel. It's got to be steel because they're going to be crashing this crane over the side of this tower.
This is the crane. This goes up on top, and this thing could spin all the way around.
Even at 10th scale, it's an extremely large model. To do the motion control photography on it, we had to build a motion control crane. That's one of the largest motion control cranes in the world.
We finished weighing, and it weighs 5,100 pounds, the whole model. And the crane top that's going to fall is 800 pounds, which is scary and exciting all at the same time.
That tower has been absolutely beautifully designed, and now we're going to see it destroyed.
The ship will pass right through all of this acrylic, which will represent the deck, and it will just bust into 1,000,000 pieces, hopefully. Or 1,000 pieces.
Unless we make it too strong, and then the ship's going to stop.
So this is what we came up with for the finale of the Mjolnir into Zion to save the day.
The Mjolnir, I put these scales on it, or these big metal plates. That gives extra detail because these plates that you can like break chunks off, like it broke, skidded against something.
The actual doors. Yes. Yeah, I think each one is like 3,500 pounds.
The gate, we must have the biggest gate. We need this gigantic mechanical, machinery-driven gate.
This door behind me was the biggest roll aid shot for me. It had the most possibilities for absolute failure.
And then when that thing is traveling down the track, we did a test yesterday, it's like a car just flying down the road. It's pretty freaky. Yeah.
This is probably one of our largest events.
The ship weighed about a ton. It had to go pretty fast. It had to make a turn. And then while it was making the turn and squeaking through the door and blowing up, it was dropping and rolling, and the nose was sliding over. So this was a pretty big deal.
We have 5 cameras, and it takes us days to set up these shots. we're all a little nervous if we're not sure whether it's gonna be right or not. We're crossing our fingers.
Ship is saved, ship is saved. Call that a direct hit.
Jesus Christ.
Looks like the Hurricane Madonna came through here. There are so many things that can be achieved by having the background into which they can put a digger or whatever it might be. They start off with a basis and then they can add to it.
Computer graphics and the miniatures are actually integrated into every shot. So you'll have CG models, you'll have hand-built models, you'll have computer graphic pyro layered on top of real pyro, and ideally the blend will be seamless.
Like taking the old-fashioned way of movies and blending it with the most modern way of doing movies and trying to get the best elements out of each.